Why are we taught that communism is evil and to hate communism? Well, hello, witzkeyman. Uh, my handle's Piro. Um, why are we taught? Well, strictly speaking, the reason we're taught that is because of a historical struggle of our side versus them. And in that context, the fact that they were communists really was just a name for whomever they really were. It was just a name. They're those people. Who are they? The communists. And we were fighting this system, the alternate system. But it wasn't really the system of communism that we were fighting. I mean, the way Stalin ran communism, there was a central monopoly, and therefore it is, to accept your premise about capitalism leading to monopolies, it was like a capitalism but with just one capitalist. So this comes from the fact that the Bolsheviks ended up openly um, endorsing the idea that since their revolution was early, right? It was before Marx had prescribed. See, Marx said that the capitalist systems would grow up, grow up, grow up, and then at a particular point, it would essentially collapse. It would be taken over by the workers who were doing all the work anyway, and then that infrastructure would be there. But Soviet Russia just skipped that whole step. And so they thought that they would have to educate people to get them to the point that history would bring them. But of course, even if you took Marx's theory, or I should say, if you took it seriously, there's no way you're going to replace the education of going through the capitalist process or any historical process with a bunch of indoctrination. Um, okay. That's basically it. Other than that, we are in a socialism, as you point out. All governments, democratic governments, involve socialism. The police in our country, mostly all the roadways, schools. Some people might disagree with some of these, but like not all of them. Like, for example, most people I talk to end up agreeing that the police should be a social structure. They're a little confused about why I say the police are socialized. But of course, we could have privatized police, and we don't. And it's a good thing. Some amount of our common infrastructure has to be socialized, and it's really just a matter of how much. And it's the same thing with capitalism. Healthy capitalism requires free markets, and free markets don't happen on their own. They are regulated. And the perfect example, the epitome, free markets, is commodity markets. And they're not only are they regulated in the sense that they have rules, they're regulated in the sense that, like the regulation in an engineering system, they keep things tuned up. There's a lot of ideas that accomplish this. For example, in the beef market, there's a way of rating beef, so you know what you're getting. You could buy a certain grade of beef before it's even been produced, a certain grade of grain, even before it's been harvested, because there's a grading system. And this allows lots of small businessmen, the farmers, to sell their product in a uniform way. And it's a great service to everyone. And capitalism requires that we create markets like this. Okay. So basically you have regulated markets. So if by capitalism you mean totally laissez-faire, unrestrained capitalism, then that system isn't being tried any more than communism is being tried. See, I don't think the China is a true communism in that sense either. It's just a totalitarian, centralized government, and they chose a name that was already around and tried to model it on some of the ideas there. But I think you have a Chinese populism in a totalitarian form in China. So I don't really think you have a communist governments that are communist. They all resolve this way. And the same thing with capitalism. I mean, there is no totally unfettered capitalism right now in the world. There's things that may seem like it or get close. You might have a dictatorship where that the personality of the leader leads to something that looks like unrestrained capitalism because they just let the businesses go. And maybe it's fascism, or maybe it's not even fascism and doesn't really have a name. It's a unique kind of form of government that's based on structures inside this uh, leader's head, and when he dies, it'll go away. Basically, my point is, um, uh, you can't force all governments into a category, and that's what we have with communism, and really probably with capitalism too. Capitalism to me is a principle that if you have money, then you should be able to use it to make more money. So I debate that principle. So I want to add to that a couple things. One, I don't believe in communism. I believe in a socialism where we have some things privatized and some things socialized, and really in both cases we have regulated markets. In the socialist system, it's much more heavily regulated, but there's participation by private contractors. And on the private side, it's much more lightly regulated, but it has much less protection of government, and it is more risky area, and that's all fine. So, but yeah, I do believe what a lot of the communists say, which is that there hasn't actually been a communist system tried. I don't think it's a big defense of communism to say that, because there's still this point of, well, one, the communist manifestos obviously appeal to people that are willing to subvert it. One. Two, the communist parties embody that and did seem willing to more or less, the corruption was conscious in a sense because the revolution was jump-started. Okay, the other thing I want to say is the reason we really have this hate is, this country was really scared that it was going to have a communist revolution. Those other nations had been having communist revolutions. There were huge railroad strikes in the late 1800s, basically. The 70s and 90s too, I think, and other people know a lot more about that than me, but very close to worker strikes, and some of the socialist movement, Huey Long, again, would be an example of some of the automatic corruption of that kind of populism. Populism is a funny thing, because I would like to consider myself populist. I am, I think, what's good for the people, and I'm pro-infrastructure. Common infrastructure that people can just use because they're citizens. I think that's good for the nation to have that kind of thing. So, that's my politics. But, and that would be populist. But a lot of the populist people, boy, they just are there to subvert and use the power of the mob. So anyway, but yeah, there was a fear reaction to this unionization, and that's what really turned into the fear of communism. It's like this nation just narrowly missed being made communist, or for that matter, having a really strong labor presence, where we'd have instead of a Democratic Party, a party of the labor unions just ran directly. Yeah, there's problems with labor unions is that they use hierarchy. You can't have a hierarchy causes corruption in social structure, and that's my feedback for your very interesting video. So. Okay, the final thing, to clarify what I mean by being for socialism, is basically, first of all, I'm calling our current system more socialized than we often admit. It's already mixed, and it's basically how I want it. Now, there's a couple more things that make me progressive, I guess, that I want socialized. I would like to see nationalized healthcare, but not fully socialized, because, for example, I like the plan where we just let all the HMOs right now sign up for the congressional plan, the plan that U.S. Congress has. Then we let anybody in the United States sign in on that plan if they can pay for it, and then we worry about later if we want to subsidize certain poor people to pay their couple $100s a month to get on that plan. So that's semi-socialized, but there are things like that. What else do I think should be socialized? I mean, not much comes up. So basically I'm saying the system we have now with regulated markets is, I think that's pretty good. There's always a debate as to which markets should be more or less regulated at what times. So yeah, good questions, good issue.